Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Hi.
Hi, we did it.
Yay, we did it. I'm so happy. It's always the most awkward thing in the world, like waiting in that first little bit for somebody to join.
Yeah.
Okay, here I am. You're not
And
here.
I'm always sure I'm going to do something wrong.
It's okay. You made it on. No muss, no fuss. We've got lots of people joining, which is super exciting.
Great.
It's so
I have
nice.
a really creaky chair.
Oh, I know, me too. Only so many things we can do to make these like as beautiful as they are, you know?
Yeah, right.
But it's so nice to see your face. I've never actually met you, so it's nice to be able to
Yeah.
see you face to face and chat a little bit and talk about your book. We've got a lot of people that are very excited tuning in, so yeah.
Great. Hi, everyone.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. It's hot. It's hot here in Toronto. Very hot. Yeah. But,
Pretty cool.
so what?
Yeah.
I mean, I love summer. I'm not complaining about the heat, but also there's like an extra level of like, oh, I'm going to be on people's tiny little screens and I don't want to sweat, which is so stupid.
My AC like up. I'm like, I don't want to be red faced and
hmm
but what can you do? All right, we've got a fair amount of people, so I think we'll just kick it off right now. So welcome everyone to our very first Inside Dundurn Press author interview. This is so exciting. Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your fantastic memoir, Alone: A Love Story. Get people kind of, this is where we're at. This is who you are, what we're talking about today. Go ahead.
all right. Okay, this is the book. Can you
Beautiful.
all see it? Well, if you get it, it won't have these flags on the side. Um, yeah. So, Alone: A Love Story is a book I started writing in 2013. I just started writing it. I didn't know I was going to write a book. And then after a while, I was like, I think this is something. So, I mean, I'm a journalist and I write every day, obviously at work, and edit people's work all the time. But this seemed something different about the writing, like different than what I'd normally done. Anyway, and then I wrote an entire book. And instead of publishing it, I decided to make a podcast for CBC Podcasts. And that's what I did. I made 3 seasons. I adapted the book, like the unpublished manuscript, into a podcast, that multi-award winning, international award winning podcast. It has like 10 million downloads right now.
Like, boost yourself up. It's an award-winning podcast. It's absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic.
I have one of the awards. Wait, there. One of them.
See?
Um,
Fantastic. But yes, continue. So sorry.
yeah, so that's, and then after that, I still wanted to put a book out. And even though the book, it's not like very different from the podcast, although it is, because myself and the producer of the podcast had to like cut a lot from the book. And also we changed the order quite a lot, so it made more sense for audio storytelling. And because we never knew whether there was going to be a next season, so I wanted each season to make sense if if we didn't get to do a next one. And yeah, so that's it. And then Dundurn said, we want to publish your book. And I said, great. And then there was a pandemic.
Yeah.
And so my book came out on May 2nd, which is, a month and a half into the pandemic. And a lot was happening in the world. So it was just, timing. But it's not complaining. There are much worse things that have happened and were happening. So, but, at the same time, it's still a bummer. It's my first book ever.
In your position too, and they're all like, there are so many bad things happening in the world, but like you put so much time and effort into this masterpiece. It's your masterpiece. You get to put it out into the world, and then it's like, oh, pandemic.
Yeah, like it was 8 years all told, and so it really, yeah. And actually the thing I was really excited about, because I love talking to people, right? So Um, and like the fans of the podcast were writing me such long, beautiful
Oh,
mail, like so much mail, like physical mail, like from all over the world, and emails and tweets and whatever. And so I was really looking forward to like signing books for people, and I was really looking forward to going to festivals, like literary festivals, which
yeah.
I have only in a little bit. I've been a presenter or a workshop person or whatever, or like a participant, just a person who loves books. But I was like stoked to be like a person being interviewed on a stage, except it's all been interviews like this,
I
which
know.
is great, but
It's not
different.
the same, right? Like I feel like there's a certain level of excitement and there's just a different kind of vibe when you get to see somebody in person, especially like for your podcast fans to be able to see you in person and have you personalize and sign a book. It probably is like it would be a very, very special thing. And that's not to say we have good news. We have good news for the podcast fans. If you want to share the news now, I'm going to reiterate at the end of this, but
It's not just for podcast fans. It's
I mean,
hopefully for book fans too.
yes, there are going to be many fans of this book. This book is fantastic. I
Thank
mean,
you.
you even just see all of the endorsements, all of the glowing reviews, right? You know, it's top tier. It's top tier memoir.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's very small fry news. Just that if you're in Toronto, I was thinking like, wouldn't it be fun to relaunch basically the book in a way? Because we were supposed to have a party, like we had a whole party planned, like it was in the works to happen in May, at the beginning of May, and which would have been open to the public as well, not just my friends and family. And Darby Bailey of Media Girlfriends was going to interview me, and then all of that, of course, went away. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just like, maybe I should just go sit in a park, get a table and just sit in a park and say like, I'm going to be there. I will sign for you if you want me to sign your book. Because I really haven't signed one person's book. And my friends, I love my friends and family, but they're also the worst. Like nobody's asked me to sign their book yet. So I really just want to sit there in a park and sign some books.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to do. But we don't have a date or time yet.
Not yet, but we're working on it. We're working on it. There will be a signing. It'll be fantastic. Keep your eyes.
It'll be a year and a half later. So what?
So what? It's
Can
fun.
do whatever we want.
Yeah. I feel like
I like to do everything backwards also, as you know, since I adapted an unpublished book into a podcast and then turned it back into a book. Who says you have to do things in the regular order?
Yeah.
Never me.
Well, topic though, I wanted to ask because I mean, part of your book is very much, there is this kind of predetermined, you have to do X, Y, Z in order in this particular way to be successful, to have this, whatever, gold star life. I don't even know what you want to call it. Do you think things are still that way? Like, do you think that there's maybe a change in the way that we perceive these expectations? Do you think these expectations have changed a little bit? What are you feeling on that?
I hope so. It's the first thing I feel, but also I think it's different for everybody, and I do think there are like cultural differences also. So like coming from like an immigrant Italian family where there are just certain expectations that are not even like laid out necessarily, but they're there. And then of course wider, just for everybody, there are expectations on us. I think especially as women, in particular, in terms of like what we should look like and how we should talk about sex, and that we all should like really love and want to be a mother. Things like that are not true for everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you when people put themselves through like when we make ourselves almost like fit into these boxes, and then that's what and that is what in the end happened with my ex-husband, who was basically like, I actually wanted all those things, but now I don't want all those things, which is what happened. And you can't really blame anyone for that. Like you could blame people for other stuff, for how they go about getting to that point.
Of course.
But the feeling I think is real. And then the nice thing the nice thing about the pandemic, I do think though, is that we've all had to chill out a lot, and like we just had to.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, anecdotally anyway, based on people I talk to, friends, family, like everyone's just like not interested in going back to normal, like, which was insane when we look back at it now. It was like treadmill all the time, and it's very difficult to maintain that, or maybe not because we did, but
yeah,
I'm enjoying being slower now. That doesn't mean I'm not writing. I didn't write a whole novel during the pandemic, which I did.
I was gonna ask, were you working on anything? Have you, like, what are you up to these days?
Well, like I have a job, like a day job. So I've worked at CBC for 25 years now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Yeah, and for the last 11 years, I've run a show called Spark, which is a technology and innovation and design show, and hosted by Nora Young. And so I'm still doing that all year round. And then in my spare time, I've been writing. I always write, like I never stop writing. So I wrote what I thought was a book of short stories, and now it's morphing into a novel.
Okay.
Yeah. So there you go.
Do you see yourself going through like the publishing process again? Like, is it something that you're kind of holding close to you right now, or do you think like eventually you'll let it out into the world? And
oh, I would love to let it out in the world.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because of what we said at the beginning. It was just like the book came out and it was like in a way, because I only ever saw it in one bookstore this whole time still, like, because, a million other books have come out since then. And like, I'm sure it's in bookstores. I just myself haven't seen it because I also haven't been in very many stores, right? Toronto was in a lockdown for like, 7,000 months longer than everyone else in the world. So yeah, I think my experience with the publishing world was weird, as it was for many first-time authors during this pandemic. So sure, I would like it to get back out in the world, but I got to finish writing it. Do you want to see Do you want to see it? It's on my wall as a storyboard.
Absolutely, show the
okay.
This is as an
okay. Wait. Let me see if I can. Okay, sorry, the shaky camera.
That's okay.
Do you see?
Oh yeah.
So there's the chapters and sticky notes. This is my process.
Look at that behind the scenes. We love to see it.
Yeah, and all the different colors correspond to a character. So
cool.
I can keep track, because there are a lot of characters. Well, now I'm never going to get this back to normal. Yeah, I'm a very visual thinker, so I always do the storyboarding. That's how I did the podcast. That's how I did the first book. Yeah, I probably keep the company 3M like in business with how many sticky notes I buy.
I've got a stack beside me, so I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
But is this a work of fiction then?
Yes.
Okay.
Or like kind of fiction.
What do you mean? I'm intrigued.
Like it's fiction, but it's inspired by real things somewhat, and then other things are totally made up. Does that make sense? So like, because I take notes, like I'm totally Harriet the Spy, if anyone read that book when they were a little kid. Like all I do is listen to people and write things down that people say. Embellished truth, somebody said, yes. Yeah. So I have like notebooks and Google Docs like full of just like things people said. And those things often just like inspire me to write an entire like story that's partly made up and partly not, or whatever. And I just have stories. Like sometimes I just write things in my head and then I write it down. And so there's like a thing I call a graveyard. Like where I just put stuff. Sometimes I call it a larder, which I guess is nicer than graveyard. And then I'm like, oh, what's in here? And I look, and then something inspires me that day, and I write a whole story around it. So it's true things, but I mix them up. So people will, like, my people in my life might recognize themselves, but it will be in a different character's body or voice, so to speak.
That's so cool.
That makes sense?
Yeah. It's fun to see the kind of behind the scenes like that, because I feel like we often ask writers for their inspiration and the writing process and things like that. But I feel like it might be different for different, like it was probably different for writing your memoir, writing Alone a Love Story than it is now. Maybe there are some things that are similar, but and also too, everyone just does things so differently. So it's very intriguing to me to hear like how things came to be, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I love process. I find it really interesting in terms of like, I mean, Alone a Love Story was very similar in the sense that like there are some stories in it that were, you know, I've said this story a million times, but like written on the back of, I had one story that was written on the back of 6 receipts. And like another one on TTC transfer and like very tiny and like on bank statement envelopes, like because sometimes it just like, you know, comes to me and I just write it wherever. Usually I have a notebook with me, but the time with 6 receipts, I was like going on a date, so I had like the tiniest dumb purse with me and no notebook. That was a mistake.
This is why you always need to get a purse or a bag or something that holds a book-sized thing. That's like my standard now. It has to be able to hold a book. If it can't even hold a paperback, we're not purchasing this bag.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. And I know people are like, you could just, my partner's always like, you could just put it in the notepad on your phone or whatever. He didn't call it a notepad, whatever. Like, you know, and I'm like, it doesn't come out that way.
It doesn't. Different. It's a different way. Like I'm meticulous. I write everything down, and because you know, put it in a Google Doc. You know, you put it there when you're like, okay, this is more solidified. But your thoughts and stuff, it's just so much more. I don't know. It gets the creative juices flowing in a different way. I feel like. But one question I did want to ask you, if anybody has any questions for Michelle, leave them in the chat. But one question I did want to ask you was more about your pre-publishing, pre-podcast, pre-writing journey. Like what is your origin story? How did you get to this kind of stage in your life where you've been writing? Have you always been a writer? Kind of things like that. Like, did you study to do like journalism or anything like that? Like more so for people who are like maybe at the beginning of their career, they can figure out how to mesh their something like you with award-winning podcast. We're gonna call it out again.
I mean, like I always wrote. Like I said, I was totally Harriet the Spy. When I was, ever since I was a little kid. So I have hundreds and hundreds of notebooks, and they're just filled with observations and stories. And I would always write in a short story style. Like that's very common for me. So they weren't necessarily journals like in a diary way, although they were. I also wrote diaries, like separate. But even those, it's very, I always was like a short story writer, even from like a really young age. And in like grade 7, I wrote a novella for nobody, just because I was mad at this book we had to read that had no good female characters in it. And so then the teacher said, well, if you think you can do better, write your own book one day. And I was like, I'm gonna write my own book right now. And I went in the basement and used my father's like typewriter, because I'm 100 years old, and this was before computers. I mean, there wasn't before computers. It was before we had a computer, 1986 or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, like basically I wrote a novella because I was mad. And then the teacher like loved it and would make the classes after that read my novella like after they read the original book on. Anyway. I don't know if he still does that or who he is or anything, but so yes, I always wrote. And then I went to university for radio and television arts instead of journalism.
Okay.
But because I had to, anyway, I had like 3 jobs while I was in university. And so I got a D average. So I barely graduated. And but I got a job at CBC while I was still barely graduating, and that was in 1996. So I was like 21.
That's cool.
And then I've been at CBC ever since. But I've worked at millions of jobs, and I just did the hustle, and it's very different for people now. Like, I get resumes for interns that are like, they have like master's degrees in journalism, and they've worked for Journalists for Human Rights, and they won a million awards. Like, I just basically walked in and was like, hey. So that's not helpful. And the same thing with the book. I'm sorry. Like, I basically was like, oh, I wrote a book. And then, like, people were interested in it. I'm just kind of like that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm not expecting, like, you through the desert to get this book up on bookshelves kind of thing. Like, it's just a curiosity thing. Because, yeah, sometimes, like, you are really fantastic at what you do, and you show up and people are like, yes, I'm so excited. And then sometimes it's a little bit harder, and for everyone that's going to be different. And that's okay.
Yeah. It definitely isn't hard for me to write, I feel. Like, anytime I'm on, like, writers' Twitter, like, writers are always, like, complaining about how much they hate to write or how they're procrastinating. And I'm like, oh, my God, I just wish I didn't have my other jobs. I would just write all day.
That's so cool.
It just doesn't, it's not hard for me. I'm not saying it's all gold, or whatever, but, like, some of it's gold. That's so silly.
All right, so we are kind of nearing our time, but me and Maria, when we have done this in the past 2 weeks, we have done a what are you reading, what are you watching, and what are you listening to? If you have
Oh my gosh.
Sorry to put, that's like 3 rapid fire questions right there. If you don't have answers, that's okay.
It's terrible that I'm not reading anything right now. And I can't even think of one thing to say. Like,
we can flip your book again. Let's show all the people that are tuning.
I'm the worst. You know what I do? Let me tell you. How about I do? What am I sewing? What am I drawing? That's what I do. I don't know if you can see behind me, but it's like, that's my work table. So that's where I like paint and draw. And there's like a sewing machine, and I like to do a lot of crafts. I've been doing a lot of gardening because we moved, and I have a backyard for the first time in a really long time.
Wow.
I got engaged. So these are the things. Oh, I like fixed these headphones. I covered them with fabric. So anyway, people are always talking about TV shows, and I'm like, but I was covering my headphones with fabric.
That's so much more interesting.
I'm just not much of a TV listener. I don't listen to podcasts. I do read books, however, I'm just not right now.
That's okay. That is.
How about my book?
Okay, so for those of you who are joining in at the end of this live, this is MichelleParise. She has written this fantastic memoir called Alone, a Love Story. You can find it everywhere books are sold. We will have a link in our bio to purchase the book from the Dundurn website. We will also have a link in the bio if you're interested in her podcast. You can find that in our bio as well. Anything else you want to add, Michelle, before we close off? This has been so much fun. I've learned.
Thank you.
You're like, so excited.
Yeah, and if anyone wants, I made a website. See, this is what I do in my spare time. I just like make things. I'm like a maker, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, it's MichelleParise.com, and there's all kinds of stuff there. Videos, art projects, music things, stuff about the book. There's a link to this anthology I wrote. It's called, I didn't write the anthology. I wrote in the anthology, Monday Was a Simpler Time. All kinds of stuff there, so you can go check it out. And then look on all of our social medias for when we figure out when I'm going to go sit in a park in Toronto so I can sign your books.
Yes, of course. We'll be posting that all over our social media as well. So yeah, just stay tuned, really. But until then, like, go purchase the book, go give it a read, and then that way you can say, like, I really want to talk about this particular point, and we can have a good discussion about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's everything on my end. I'm so happy that we got to do this. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your day. Michelle, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day as well. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kristina. Bye.